Wow. Hi, everyone. I just got my hair cut today, and if you've watched some previous stuff on this channel, I haven't been posting much here recently. I've been focusing on my other channel and other stuff in my life, like being a pet owner. If you go on my other YouTube, my hair's down to like here, because I just got it cut like 3 hours ago. That's how I do it. Anyway, I want to do a little intro thing because this is going to be a fairly common thing I do. I don't want to flood my other YouTube, which has focuses on other things, and this is more my place to just vlog and be me and talk about whatever I want to talk about. It's a catch-all, essentially. I was a supporter of Bernie Sanders in 2016. I was appalled by the things that I saw happen in that 2016 primary, the manipulations, the deception, all that stuff. And of course, the moment Bernie threw his hat into the ring for the 2020 election, the moment it happened, this stuff started coming out. And daily, because I posted a lot of pro-Bernie stuff in the past, whenever I open my Google, because Google knows what you're doing at all times, practically every time I open the Google feed, like where's my okay, well, my phone's around here somewhere, but anyway, when I open my Google app, it gives you the bar to type in whatever you want to search for, but then there's a bunch of articles. It gives you a feed of articles to go through, and practically every day, usually more than once, there's at least one article a day that is some anti-Bernie article. It's like they know that I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter, so they're trying to flood me with stuff to change my mind, because maybe one out of every 10 or 15 articles that comes through is actually indifferent or maybe positive towards Bernie. They're incredibly rare. Most of the stuff that comes through is, here's another reason not to trust Bernie. And I already know just habitually from what I've experienced in the past not to trust these articles. But not trusting them is not disproving them. If I support Bernie Sanders and I want him to win and I think he's a justifiable candidate, then what about all these articles that are coming out that are against him? And I've picked up my audio recorder literally on my iPhone here when sorry, I was something on my finger. And when these articles come up, and I've started addressing the content in them because they're all just smear articles. And I'm finding, I'm waiting for that article to come along that's really going to stump me. And even when there's ones that come along that I'm like, okay, I don't know if this is going to be an easy one to argue away. Then something happens, and I realize, oh my god, this is just another bullshit smear article. So I don't want to ramble too much. Sometimes I'm going to get a little, emotionally invested. This is the future of our country we're talking about, and a lot of major issues. I just want to do a little intro here because these are going to start popping up a lot on my channel, and I go very in-depth sometimes. Most of these are going to be 45 minutes or so of me delving into these different efforts that various forms of media are trying to do to essentially say you shouldn't vote for Bernie because of this, that, and the other. And so I'm just doing this to get the ball rolling. This first one is almost an hour. I was walking around Mount Tabor Park in Portland, had time to kill, and this article came up. It was a New York Times article, which don't trust the New York Times ever. Fact-checking Bernie, so immediately I dived in. So anyway, that's the first one in this series, and there's going to be a lot of these because people need to know this stuff. This is important. 2020 is not an election that we can afford to screw around with. That's where I'm at least, and I still think to this point Bernie is by far, it's not even close, the best candidate we have available to actually address these issues that we drastically need addressed right now. So anyway, I'm going to shut up now and start talking. Anyway, here's the first one where I talk about this New York Times article that I read. But anyway, I am talking to you about my man Bernie Sanders because Google doesn't know when to quit. Is pretty much the situation. As I may have said in other recordings I've done, and I'm liking using this method recording because I can focus more on what I'm saying and not worry about how I'm looking on camera. Maybe you want to see my beautiful, excited face, but this is easier for me to discuss what's going on without having any distractions. And the focus of this is me discussing what flows through my Google account, or my Google feed, essentially, because I've posted a lot of pro-Bernie stuff because I support Bernie Sanders. And the more I post that stuff, the more Google tries to ram anti-Bernie stuff through my feed. You'll hear me reference that at least once probably in all of these recordings, because that's what gets my goat, because I'm not... that's somebody's... Okay. I thought that was a fox. Nope, that's a dog. There's just a fox wandering through the park. Alright, because the New York Times, this came through my feed, the New York Times published an article fact-checking Bernie Sanders on the campaign trail. Well, I already knew that this was going to be a smear piece. There was no way that this article was going to address 5 or 6 issues that Bernie's touched on and say, yeah, he's been pretty right on about all these. It's the New York Times, for God's sakes. They're no friend to Bernie nor the American people. So the moment I saw that, I knew I was going to have to go through this and see how they managed to smear him. And maybe, just maybe, Bernie said something that was wrong. Bernie said something that was inaccurate. The fact of the matter remains, practically every politician we support, every politician we want to support, most of them lie with every word they say. Practically everything they say they're going to do is a lie. I mean, that's what they're best at, unfortunately. So even if Bernie is inaccurate or a little bit deceptive, I don't want to justify that. I want him to be direct and honest, because being dishonest doesn't benefit him in any way, because every dishonest thing he says, someone's going to catch and use to, smash him, slander him, however they can. That's just the nature of the thing. And I'd like to know that I'm supporting a candidate who's not full of shit like most of the rest. But that being said, even if Bernie's a little dishonest here and there, that still makes him 50 times more honest than most of the candidates are. Makes him 50 times more honest than Hillary, his old adversary in the 2016 campaign. And the thing is, the Democratic candidates that are throwing their hats in the ring, practically all of them are presenting themselves as Bernie-ish type candidates. And the newspapers have attached themselves to that. They've said, well, everybody's doing it now, so Bernie's not even relevant anymore. And it's like, no, they're not doing it. They're just saying they're doing it because they realized in the 2016 campaign, and even in the midterms, they've started seeing a lot more positivity towards a progressive standpoint among candidates. So what's happening? A bunch of bullshit candidates that aren't progressives are standing up saying, hey, look at me, I'm a progressive, I support all this shit too. And it's just a bunch of nonsense. So, that's where we're at. That's the unfortunate situation, is that we have a bunch of bullshit candidates posing as Bernie-ish type candidates when they're just centrists. Some of them are even Republicans. It's just a game to these people. So, they're already just a bunch of liars and scum. And I don't really trust any of them, unfortunately, especially with what I saw in 2016. I don't trust the Democratic Party as far as I can throw them. Just because they're not the Republicans, just because they're not the worst of the two main party systems, doesn't mean they're godsends. And people who are hardcore Democrats need to start understanding that shit. They need to stop acting like the Democratic Party is the party of good, just because their party has fewer Republicans, because, well, let's face it, the Democratic Party has their own share of Republicans. Wolves in sheep's clothing, as it were. But anyway, so the moment I saw this fact-checking Bernie Sanders article, and I saw it was from the New York Times, I was like, well, here we go. So, here we go. Now, I essentially took just a boatload of screen captures of it, so I wouldn't have to cycle back and forth through it, but I still have to kind of bounce back and forth because I couldn't get Bernie's comments and all of the criticisms, because obviously they're going to be critical because it's the New York Times. It's their bread and butter to smash people like Bernie. New York Times sucks. Anyway, because this was very... I read through it. This isn't just a blind run through. I have read it, and, I knew it was going to be against him to begin with, but I still read it, and it, pretty much revealed just about everything that I expected. Okay, first thing they reference... Oh, God, I'm sorry. A mosquito got on me earlier, so now twinge I feel. I feel like there's a mosquito on me. Anyway, first thing that Bernie Sanders said. 4 years ago, when we said that healthcare is a human right, which it should be, we were told that was a radical idea, that the American people wouldn't accept it, which is true. That was happening left and right. Politicians, media, corporate people, people in the medical industry, big pharma, they were all like, oh, it's a pipe dream, because they don't stand to profit from it. At least, most of them don't. And the ones that might are still, they're playing the game. Polls just came out the other day, consistent with other polls. 70% of the American people support a Medicare for All single-payer program. Now, before I get into what the New York Times said, let me just say, the fact that 100% of people don't support, Medicare for All is really sad, but there's always going to be people that are uber Republican, are uber anti-helping anybody. Anytime you help anybody, you're, a communist. And then there's the sect of people that are like, they get good medical, they get at least good to okay to decent to great health care through their job. So the idea is that, some people don't get good health care unless they're, working. So why should, other people get health care, and not have to, quote, earn it the way I do, which I understand the anger, I understand the frustration, but the fact remains, the fact that people are dying because they can't afford and can't get good health care by far trumps the fact that you want to be a bitchy little asshole because you have to work. Be grateful you have a good job that offers you good health care. Because not everybody can get that. And there's never going to be a time, probably, in this country where that is going to work, where everybody, without, Medicare for all, medical care for all, there's never going to be a time where everybody's going to have a job and everybody's going to have a job good enough that they can get decent health care. All right? A system where that is how it works is not going to work out. So let me just get that out of the way. That it's ridiculous. Anybody who doesn't support the idea that everybody should have medical coverage, which is a system that has been shown to be cheaper than our current system, so don't talk to me about how it's going to bankrupt us and all that horse shit. If you don't support the idea that everybody deserves medical care, you're not a decent human being, you're scum. I'm sorry, that's not even an opinion anymore. I mean, how can you be so trapped in the dark ages to honestly think that every human being doesn't deserve medical care just because you have some situation that makes it this for, it's ridiculous. But anyway, obviously the comment that's going to be called into question is his claim that 70% of American people support a Medicare for All single-payer program. Sorry, I just got a text. So again, even if he was exaggerating this, he should be pushing for it. But again, you want the guy you're supporting to be honest, even though that doesn't seem to matter to most people. Here's the New York Times response. Fact-checking Bernie on the statement. This is exaggerated. In bold, because of course they want to make sure you read that part. This is an exaggeration. Bernie's exaggerating things. He's not even lying, he's just exaggerating things. I don't think there's one thing in here where they say he actually lied, which is what most politicians do. They just flat out lie. They make up shit left and right. They make up perspectives, they make up beliefs, they make up things they support, and then they just throw it in the dumpster once they get their way and get, once again, schmooze the American people, most of whom don't pay any attention to who they're voting for in the first place. But here, they can't even get Bernie on a lie. He's so much more honest than most politicians that even the scumbag New York Times could not just get him on a string of lies. They had to just say that he misrepresents things, And that's just as bad as lying, which, I mean, you can make an argument for that, but I just think it's hilarious that they couldn't get him on just a straight lie, try as they might. And on a side note, I'm very surprised that I haven't encountered anybody. I'm just lingering on the backside of the reservoir here. And nobody's coming up and down this pathway, so I'm just kind of lingering here because I don't want anybody bugging me. Anyway, this is exaggerated. The idea that 70% of the American people support Medicare for all single-payer program. While Medicare for all has grown more popular since Mr. Sanders' campaign on it in 2016, not all polls show as many as 70% of Americans support it. So he says a poll just came out just the other day. So he openly expresses that there's only one poll he's referencing. He's not saying all the polls say 70% of Americans. So this first statement in this article is deceptive because it says not all polls show as many as 70% of Americans supporting it, which means that statement in and of itself acknowledges that there have been polls, or at least one, that says that 70% of Americans do support it. So they're openly acknowledging that if Bernie is saying a poll came out, that there are polls that he could be referencing that justify his statement. He didn't say all the polls. So unless he's saying every poll in America says 70% of Americans want a single-payer Medicare for all system, then yeah, that would be exaggerating things. But that's not what he said. He said poll, singular, came out the other day, consistent with other polls. Okay, so he does acknowledge that there were other polls that say that they're 70%, but he didn't say consistent with all other polls. He didn't say the majority of polls. He just said there's other polls that also have shown this. So you're not counterbalancing him by saying not all the polls suggest 70% of people support the system. As lawmakers began working on a healthcare overhaul in 2009, support for single-payer system hovered from about 30 to 50% in most polls. Well, that's 10 years ago, so those polls aren't even relevant, but you see they're using lower numbers to try to counterbalance Bernie when these are polls from 2009, 10 years ago. So they aren't relevant to the conversation, but the New York Times wants you to think they're relevant. When the Affordable Care Act became law a year later, national discussions of single-payer systems dissipated, and sporadic polling showed that public opinion towards such systems did not change much from the end of 2009 to 2014. Well, of course it dissipated, because more people that didn't have health care were able to get health care. And you know how it is. When people get, people are going to clamor for a better system. And then once they get the health care they need, they're going to tend to not be as invested in the issue. It's sad, but that's how a lot of people are. So, I mean, that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. Most polls now show at least a majority of Americans supporting Medicare for all, though not at the levels Mr. Sanders is suggesting. Again, he didn't say all polls. In polls from Kaiser Family Foundation, I think it's supposed to be from the Kaiser Family Foundation, 53 to 59% favor such a system. Reuters has found 60 to 70% support it, so there's one. But about 30 to 40% say they are less likely to back Medicare for all if income taxes will increase. Yeah, of course. We all want a system handed to us, but we don't want to have to accept the responsibilities for it. And we don't know how taxes are going to be affected by this. We just don't know yet. And there's a difference between income tax increase of like 2% to like 5%, 8%, 10%. Similarly, in recent polling by Real Clear Politics, that sounds sketchy as hell, 65% of respondents backed a Medicare for all system, but support dipped to 55% when told that the system would eliminate private health insurance. Okay. But still, even this article acknowledges that there are some that have said as many as 70% of people. And they just reference a couple of polls. They don't show the stats for every single poll that's been done to show how many have shown support in the area of 70%. They just reference, 3 freaking polls that are, predominantly below 70%, and therefore Bernie Sanders is exaggerating things. This proves absolutely nothing. Anyway, next point. Here's next thing that Mr. Sanders said. Now, this doesn't say it's exaggerated. It says this particular statement is misleading. 4 years ago, I was in a national TV debate, and the moderator said, Senator Sanders, what do you consider to be a major foreign policy and national security crisis? And I think they expected me to say Al Qaeda, ISIS, which are very serious threats to this country. But I responded and I said the major national security crisis we face is climate change. And the moderator actually laughed. Well, they are not laughing today. That is the statement. So, they expected him to respond in reference to, terrorism, a terrorist group. But he actually responded to the one thing that's going to kill us all, independently of what terrorists do, which is if we don't change how we are on climate change. Which I think is a pretty solid statement. He was trying to make a point, Another faction could commit an act of terrorism on America, and it'd be a horrible tragedy, and a certain number of people would die. But we aren't all going to die, whereas if we don't change the way we are about our climate and the way we're affecting it, that's going to kill off all of us. Nobody's going to survive. I don't care how rich, how healthy you are. That is going to kill. That's not just going to make us extinct. It's going to make most other species on this planet extinct. So Bernie was trying to make a point, okay, when he said that. Anyway, New York Times regards this as misleading. In October 2015, during the first Democratic primary debate, the CNN anchor Anderson Cooper, scumbag, asked the 5 major candidates to name the greatest national security threat to the United States. Mr. Sanders' response, the global crisis of climate change, earned applause, not chuckles, from the audience, which he didn't say the audience chuckled at him. He said the moderator chuckled at him, so I don't even understand what that's supposed to mean. This person doesn't even know how to deceive properly. Video of the debate does not show Mr. Cooper or anyone else laughing either. So I guess, Bernie doesn't say in the comment what debate it was. So is there possibly another debate where he says, they ask, what do you think the greatest threat is? And he says climate, because he's obviously going to stay on that point. He thinks climate change is more dangerous than any terrorist faction, and he's right. Because even the biggest terrorist faction in the world isn't going to kill off everybody, and not just humans, but, most species. So they're just presuming it was this CNN debate, and maybe it was. But it's a presumption being reached, which in and of itself is misleading, because they're just implying that it's this certain debate, and in Bernie's, now maybe somewhere else in Bernie's speech he said is specifically this CNN debate. I don't know that, because I'm going based off the information that the article is giving me. But to me, it seems like they're just presuming this was the one he was talking about. Martin O'Malley, the former governor of Maryland, who was in the Democratic primary race for like 1 or 2 states before he jumped ship, because, he just wasn't getting the support. I would have taken him over Hillary. Also listed climate change as well as the Islamic State and the nuclear threat posed by Iran before Mr. Sanders responded. So I'm presuming what they're saying there is that, what Bernie said wasn't that great because Martin O'Malley said it before him, I guess. But he also made sure to reference, threat of the Islamic State, which we've been hearing that nonsense forever. If you're a member of Islam, you're automatically a terrorist, apparently. As well as, and then the nuclear threats posted by Iran. Well, you know what? Guess what? If it was the same question, they asked for the one specific biggest threat. They didn't ask for multiple threats. So, good on Martin O'Malley for addressing multiple things, but don't make it like he's better than Bernie because he made sure to reference all the terroristy stuff along with climate change. Okay, if the question is, what is which means one, singular, what is the greatest threat? But again, they're trying to show that Bernie was just kind of bucking off of Martin O'Malley. Well, Martin O'Malley referenced climate change first, so Bernie was just stealing what he said. You don't know that. You don't know. Jesus. Like, is this the best you can do, New York Times? You're supposed to be this great, prestigious paper. I just realized I've been lingering in this same area. Granted, I probably just look like I'm talking to someone on my phone, I guess, while holding another phone. But I'm just lingering in this area by the reservoirs because it's a beautiful view and stuff. I realized there's like a security camera just right next to me. It's been here all this time. I wonder if it has sound. I wonder if they're going to be like, dude, there's this guy just rambling about Bernie Sanders here. You think he's a threat to national security? Because Lord knows Bernie Sanders is. God, now there's somebody actually finally coming this way, so I'm going to have to start meandering. But anyway, back to what I was saying. I'm trying not to get too distracted. Because they're not done talking here. Okay, at the second Democratic primary debate, held a day after a terrorist... oh, wait, hold on. Still the notion that climate change posed a national security risk because it is, as Mr. Sanders suggests, a threat multiplier, was hardly a fringe belief. Well, nobody who said that it was a fringe belief. You're the ones taking his statement and trying to blow it up into something. And see, this is how tacky they are. They're attacking this guy based on something he said, 3 to 4 years ago, when this article supposedly is trying to focus. And I know he references this himself, but it's like they're trying to blow stuff he said years ago out of the water and trying to make it like he's intended it in a way that he never said he intended it. Someone asked him a question at a presidential debate, and he answered it to his beliefs. And this whole section is trying to act like he's taken that idea from other people, that he thinks he's so trendy by referencing climate change. It's like, he never said that. There's nothing in his statement here that suggests that's the case. So this whole entire argument by this New York Times writer is just, it's creating fabrication. It's creating a fire where there's no smoke. The Obama administration, scientists and security experts had sounded the alarm months and years before the debates. Yeah, notice they didn't do a whole lot about it, though. So, wow, yeah, great, awesome. So again, the whole substance of their attack on his comment is to just, again, like the statement before, either presume, infer, or mislead. So they call Bernie Sanders misleading, and then use a misleading perspective to try to back that. So it's really the New York Times article that's being misleading. But of course, you don't criticize the New York Times. They're an institution. Anyway, here we go. So this is Martha McCallum, who I think is probably still on Fox News. I know she at least used to be. Speaking to Bernie. She said, you think we should eliminate nuclear power, which I know they did in Vermont, but it ended up moving your emissions higher. Mr. Sanders, honestly, I don't think that that's correct. Ooh, here we go. He was right. This is the only thing addressed in this article where they say Bernie Sanders was accurate. Because, of course, if they criticized everything he said, they'd come off as biased. And, of course, they are, because they don't even have anything of substance to discuss here. But, so, honestly, like, this is such a small thing. It's not even in relation really to his presidential campaign. I mean, it kind of is, because they're discussing the concept of nuclear power. But this is more something he did locally in Vermont. But they found something to stick in there that's not really that big of a deal. I mean, overall. Just so they could say, oh, well, here's something that Bernie was right about. And that way, they don't come off super biased. I honestly think that's the only reason this is even in this article. Here we go. This is what really got me. When you talk about how much someone's willing to mislead you, how far someone's willing to go to make a candidate look bad, is when they start defending Donald Trump as a way to get at Bernie. When you are literally on the defensive side of Donald Trump about anything over Bernie Sanders, like, you have just given up at this point. So there's a section in this article, Criticisms of Trump. Here's what Bernie said, in reference to Trump, obviously. His budget calls for a $1.5 trillion cut. in Medicaid over a 10-year period, because of course he and the Republicans don't care about humans. Of course, unless you're threatening to abort a fetus, then they care. I mean, obviously they don't, but it's part of their system to at least act like they care. So, $1.5 trillion cut in Medicaid over a 10-year period, and an $800 billion cut in Medicare, and billions in Social Security. That's what Bernie said, referencing statistically, Trump's threat to the medical system as well as Social Security system. The response from the New York Times article: "This is exaggerated." Here we go. Mr. Trump's latest federal budget for the 2020 fiscal year did call for spending reductions for Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security programs. Looking under the hood, however, reveals that the suggested changes may not be, not they're just not, but they may not be quite as large or as draconian to beneficiaries as Mr. Sanders' cited figures suggest. So when they say Mr. Sanders' cited figures, are they acknowledging that he actually referenced a valid resource on this? I mean, they're already not just flat out saying he's wrong, because they say things may not be quite as large. So here we go. I'm already getting the sensation that the New York Times is trying to defend crooked behavior on the part of Donald Trump and still defend it just because maybe it's not going to be as bad as Bernie says it is, but apparently he cited accurate figures. So apparently he was honest and cited valid figures, yet he's called exaggerated. So, I mean, already, like this just shows how far they're willing to go in order to stop someone, So anyway, yeah, I can't wait to see what's next on this thing. Okay. Moving a little bit down. So he's talking about eliminating the expansion of Medicaid coverage to poor adults and instead divert some of the funds to block grants for states to set up their own programs. Alright, so these changes would result in $1.5 trillion cut to Medicaid over a decade. So right there, they openly admit that the report admits directly that he was being honest when he said over 10 years, $1.5 trillion cut. But it gives states $1.2 trillion to enforce the block grants. Okay. Good for you. Where's that other $0.3 trillion, $300 billion going then? If there's a $1.5 trillion cut, but there's benefits to the tune of $1.2 trillion, where's the rest of that money going? And again, I don't know. But again, here they are. They're acknowledging the potential positive, not a guaranteed positive, but the potential positives to come from this Medicaid, which still results in less money than what is being taken out. But again, see, here's where the manipulation is. Bernie just said, he's cutting $1.5 trillion from Medicaid over 10 years, and this article acknowledges that. And then it throws this supposed positive in to make it like Bernie's being deceptive. No, he's not. You can argue, fine, yeah, Bernie isn't referencing this block grant concept, but the fact of the matter is, he stated a figure and a time in which that figure would occur, and he was accurate about it. Plain and simple. Altogether, the budget calls for a $777 billion cut in spending on Medicaid and health care subsidies under the Affordable Care Act. So he said $800 billion. It's $777 billion. Politicians round up figures all the time. So if someone's going to say he's being dishonest because he rounded up, you're going to have to criticize every other politician who's ever ran for any political office. I'm talking president, senator, house people, governors, mayors, city council people. Everybody rounds figures up. Okay. A third of the more than 800 billion in cuts, and they put cuts in parentheses because after all, Bernie Sanders is being deceptive, to Medicare comes from diverting funding from two Medicare programs. Payments that cover the cost of hospitals that serve a disproportionate share of poor patients, and payments for graduate education into other portions of the budget. So one of the things they're diverting Medicare payments is payments that cover the cost of hospitals that serve a disproportionate share of the poor patients. Now, when they say disproportionate, does that mean they help too many poor patients or barely any? Disproportionate, that usually means they're helping too many poor people. So you're cutting medical coverage for areas that need it the most, is what that translates to. So yeah, that's fucking awesome. After, yeah. So yeah, you see where this is at. So again, they openly acknowledge that like what he's saying is accurate, and the things that they're criticizing him for, that you could criticize him for, are the most nitpicky nonsense around. He said 800 billion and it's only 777 billion. How dare he? $23 billion is a lot of money. It is. And you know what? It's something, I hate to use the excuse that everyone does it, but every single politician at any level does that. They just do, okay? But again, you have a newspaper that's so dedicated to fighting off Bernie Sanders any way they can, any way, shape, or form, that they're willing to defend Donald Trump's actions in the process. And that doesn't frighten people. Sure as hell frightens me that the media is going to be that blatantly, disproportionately, if they're going to use the word in the article, bias against Bernie Sanders. It's ridiculous. Okay, here's another comment they use. Bernie referencing Trump. Today, under the Trump administration, 7 million people have already lost their health insurance. Their response: this is exaggerated. All right, well, let's see. A January poll by Gallup, January Gallup poll, poll from just a couple months ago, showed that the uninsured rate increased to 13.7% in the fourth quarter of 2018, so the last 3 months, essentially, of 2018, October, November, December. The uninsured rate rose to 13.7% from 10.9% in the same period in 2016. So, obviously, end of 2016 is when Trump was elected. So yes, through the process of Trump's presidency, the article even says right here, that percentage corresponds to about 7 million more uninsured. So, the article admits right there, since roughly around the time Donald Trump was elected, because the fourth quarter of 2016 begins in October, and the presidential election happens early November. Now, granted, Trump doesn't take control till January, but still, minus a couple of months, we're referencing the time period in which the Trump administration has been in place. And in that time, the percentage growth of uninsured people accumulates to approximately 7 million people, which is what he says. Today, under the Trump administration, 7 million people have already lost their health care. They're probably going to get hooked up on the term lost. They didn't lose it. It was taken, or, I don't know. Anyway, let's dive on in here. Other sources of data, however, do not show as large of an increase. Well, so you have a poll that shows that he was being honest. Now, maybe Bernie is referencing that poll. And if he is, polls are valid. Politicians reference them all the effing time. So if he's referencing, say, that poll, which are recent figures, in relation to our status in terms of insured people just a few months back, if he's referencing that, then he's not exaggerating anything. Because he's using a valid resource to make that statement. That even this dumbass article acknowledges there's a poll. And there's at least one poll, a Gallup poll, as recent as January 2019. Within the last couple of months. But other sources of data show that there hasn't been that large of an increase. Yeah, let's act like the insurance system is fine because maybe there's not that many people that have been screwed. There's still a lot that have been screwed, but maybe it's not as bad as we think. So yeah, and then they, proceed to go on and blither about, these other statistics that come out. And I should probably reopen the article because it doesn't look like I probably tried to take another screenshot, but it's ending right there, and then I just have a copy of the front of the article. So, fact-checking Bernie Sanders on the campaign trail. So I'm going to have to because I don't want to just be like, well, they're going to reference other dumb statistics that don't matter, and then, that's the end of it. So, pulling up the article. Oh, and by the way, this is a recent article. This isn't something old. Obviously it's referencing 2019, but yeah, this is from May 25th, 2019, so this is from just a few days back. But okay, so I'm actually reopening it so I can scan down, pick up where I left off. Talking about his debate, talking about this. Ooh, a Memorial Day mattress thing. Here we are. Criticisms of Trump. God, this phone sucks. Just move! Okay, we're almost there. Okay, here we go. The National Center for Health Statistics estimated that 29.7 million were uninsured in the first 9 months of 2018, compared with 28.2 million in the first 9 months of 2016, an increase of 1.5 million. Okay. I see what they're going for. They're showing that there are more uninsured, but as of by the end of September 2018, it was only 1.5 million higher. Polling from the Commonwealth Fund. These are all I'm very suspicious of some of these sources. They sound like think tank weirdo nonsense. But anyway, maybe they're not. Polling from the Commonwealth Fund found that in 2018, the uninsured rate among U.S. adults aged 19 to 64 was 12.4%, statistically unchanged from 2016, despite efforts by the Trump administration to cripple the Affordable Care Act. So they're quoting this poll from 2018. So they say uninsured rate was 12.4%, statistically unchanged from 2016. But then they don't reference that statistic. We're just supposed to believe them when they say it's unchanged. So I guess we just blindly believe them. Okay. But again, here they are. They're just throwing other polls that show potentially different information. Stuff that is older than this Gallup poll. That isn't to, negate their significance. But the fact of the matter is, poll at the start of 2019 shows statistically different results. And it's a Gallup poll, which are more relied upon than these random National Center for Health Statistics, which I'm assuming is fairly significant. The fact of the matter is, we have what all polls have, which is polls are done and they show different results. So because there's other polls that are showing maybe figures might be different, they're just a counterbalance to this Gallup poll. It's just another poll. And that poll, in effect, shows a $700 million, 700 million people, 7 million people increase who are uninsured from dating back to 2016. So, Bernie's not exaggerating anything because he has at least one poll to back him. Okay? This article openly references how pretty much everything he said is verified by at least one substantial source. Now, is that the only source? Obviously, I don't know. How many millions of polls are being done on a variety of subjects all the time? But it seems like this is the best that the New York Times can do, is to just reference a couple other polls, not the preponderance of polls. They don't show us all of the statistics of every poll taken in this regard. They just show us a couple of other polls that don't show that same information, and therefore Bernie's only relying on this and he's ignoring this, which is a presumption, a misleading presumption they're placing on him, and they're using that as a way to say that he's misleading and exaggerating things. Here we go. Getting to the end. The Census Bureau reached a similar conclusion that the uninsured rate and number of uninsured in 2017 were not statistically different from 2016. The Bureau has not yet released 2018 figures. Okay, so you're using as a reliable source information that breaks off at the end of 2017, a freaking year and a half ago. A whole year before Bernie's even referencing the actual changes. You know? So, and again, it's just, oh my God. It's really, okay, actually, and I do have to regress. Sorry, I thought it said from the same period in 2015, so actually, the Gallup poll showing the increase is from only 2 years apart, so the end of 2018 from 2016. I'm sorry, I read that as 2015, so I want to correct that here when I was talking about how this is how it was when Trump first came into office. No, he was actually already in office when this 10.9% figure was the same, so I guess he's helping the economy so much. Too bad he's not helping us in any other way, and I mean, are we honestly going to give him credit for making the economy better? Are we really that dumb? So anyway, yeah, one fix there. So again, they use other reports. They even use a census reference that cuts off a whole year before the time period Bernie's referencing. So it's not valid at all, but they use it to defend their point. There wasn't really much of a change here. There wasn't much change here. I'll tell you one thing. 2016, last quarter of 2016, I had health insurance. Last quarter of 2018, I didn't. I'm one of those people that lost his health insurance. So yeah, the author is a fact-check reporter. Well, she's not very good at her job. Based in Washington. She came to the Times in 2017, sorry to bug on me, from the fact-checking service PolitiFact. I wonder if they're as reliable as Snopes is. Snopes does some good stuff, but when it comes to, real serious things, they always balk. Oh, and there's a correction at the bottom of the article I may as well reference. May 28, 2019. So actually, this has actually been added since I read the article, because I read it right after it came out, and I think it's the 28th today as I'm recording this, so this is new. An earlier version of the article misspelled the surname of a moderator at a Fox News town hall in which, they're just admitting that they misspelled Martha McCallum's name. They called her Mick instead of Mac. So, alright, whatever. But you see what I'm getting at? That whole article steeped in misleading information, in the efforts to argue that Bernie Sanders is misleading people, and yet in just about every situation they literally spoon-feed us at least one resource, one valid resource that defends practically to the letter what Bernie Sanders said. And I love that he's been on the campaign trail for a couple months now. He's been saying a lot of things. He's been saying a lot of things over the last 4 years. And this is the best you could get in terms of finding deception. I mean, most politicians, especially ones running for the presidency, you could find more deceptions than this in one speech they do. But of course, the New York Times is going to focus in on fact-checking Bernie Sanders. Have they, or are they going to do the same thing with Joe Biden? I mean, if Bernie's supposedly second in all these polls and Joe Biden's the front runner, wouldn't it behoove the American people to know how honest Joe Biden is? Walking around touching girls and, pushing crime bills that are ruining the lives of people who are committing crimes so much meeker than what a lot of other people are doing, and getting longer sentences. People get 30, 40, 50 years, sometimes life sentences for random crimes, random drug busts. And then, oh, hey, the Stanford rapist, a white Stanford kid, he did what, 3 years? Or sorry, 3 months, not 3 years. Even 3 years wouldn't have been enough for that piece of shit. But yeah, he did like 3 months for this horrendous violation of another human being, a woman's body. And he practically got a slap on the wrist. Like, just disgusting. And then it's like the moment Joe Biden threw his hat in the ring. I mean, like, has he lost his mind? Because he's just so open about his bias. His republicanism just shows so much. Like, right after he threw his hat in the ring. And it was deemed that this was a real quote. Like, you read it and you're like, somebody had to have made this up. But no, it was verified. That he essentially immediately came out and criticized people who think, like, the rich people are like... Because we all know that, like, whoever has the power has the power. They know. They have the power of the media, they have the power of everything. They have the power of, all these companies, all this power. They control politicians, so on and so forth. So the richest of the rich, yeah, they have authority over everything we have, everything we experience. And here, freaking Joe Biden comes out and is like, it's ridiculous to think that, the richest of the rich are the problem. Then who is the problem? The poor people that are barely surviving? Like, what are you talking about? You're one of the rich people, Joe. And you obviously see yourself as all-powerful because you think you can touch anybody any which way you feel like it. I mean, I've made my point, hopefully. And I'm going to probably be doing this a lot between now and when the elections start, because it's important. The media is going to do everything they can to push the agenda that Bernie Sanders is not right for America. He's a bad guy, he's a liar, he's going to turn us into a socialist, communist hellhole on earth. When it's like, can things really get that much worse? You can say what you want about the freaking economy. Everybody's all, excited that the economy's a little better than it was before, and attributing all that to our current administration, which is insane. I'm sorry, I'm climbing a hill, so I might get a little winded here. But, okay, so it's amazing what an increased job market, no matter how minute, it's amazing how much an increase in the job market will make people forget all the other shit that's wrong. Make them forget about climate change. Make them forget about health insurance, civil rights, crime, prescription drug addiction. The whole thing. All right, I made it to the top of the hill. I'm trying to pull back so I'm not just heaving breaths into your face. Of course, exhausted myself a lot more by talking while I was climbing the hill. So anyway, this trash is going to continue. They're gonna keep posing the same horseshit. The media is gonna keep throwing news story and article after article at you, trying to convince you to hate Bernie Sanders. Like his 2016 run was a fluke. It didn't matter. Or you thought he was such a great guy. Well, guess what? He's secretly a bad guy. He's the wool in sheep's clothing. That's how the most crooked of the crooked try to get their way, is by making someone who's actually good look like what they actually are. You know, the news media, media in general lies to us all the time. They say what their bosses tell them, and their bosses tell them what whoever's above them tells them. So, you know, they get good at lying, unfortunately. Or, you know, if they don't just flat out lie, they get good at misleading you, you know, which is almost as effective. You know, you can almost defend yourself easier when you're misleading as opposed to just flat out lying. And that whole article I just read from, pure exaggerations, pure misconception, all the stuff they accuse Bernie of doing without properly proving their point 100% in any example, they used what they accused Bernie of doing. That whole article was a mix of exaggerations and misleadings and misperceptions, you know? And that's going to happen. It's going to keep happening until they kill Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign. It is going to keep happening as long as he is getting at least moderately positive support. This nonsense is going to continue to come out, and they're all misconceptions. You know, I mean, honestly, if Bernie was a scumbag, if I was Bernie, I'd be suing these newspapers left and right for completely slandering him. I mean, this article used the art of manipulation, but some just flat out lie, you know? And when you do that and you're in the media industry, of course, you know, if you're part of a media conglomerate that has a lot of money and a lot of power behind you, you'll find ways to beat stuff like that. But it's what it is. It's a bunch of nonsense. You know, they're trying to crush Bernie, so worst case we have Trump or Biden, both of whom will play the game. And we can't afford that anymore. We can't afford that in 2020. We can't afford a candidate who is just going to play the game. You know, obviously I want Trump out of office, but I don't trust Joe Biden as far as I can throw him. Yeah, Joe Biden will probably reverse some of the crap Trump's done because he's supposed to be, you know, a good, real, decent, educated, experienced Democrat. So he's going to do just enough to appease his Democratic followers, and then we'll, you know, praise him as a king, the guy who undid all the wrongs that Trump did, when really he'll just undo enough stuff to look like the guy that's doing that, because he's a piece of crap. So I don't trust either of them, and as long as the media is just going to be lying left and right, I'm going to say my piece in defense of, in my opinion, the only person right now who's actually going to do anything about what's wrong. Like, I don't really trust anybody else, and you pretty much don't really ever have anybody that often to trust. Well, I finally regained my breath, so I guess on that note I will cease my ramblings. I tend to ramble too long as it is, so I may as well stop when I catch myself. But anyway, thank you for listening. I hope, you know, those of you that are listening, whether you fully agree with me, kind of agree with me, or don't, I hope you at least understand what I'm getting at when I address this stuff. I'm not telling you you have to vote for Bernie. Obviously, that's my perspective right now, because I'm not seeing anybody else who's really gonna get anything done like he's actually going to try to do. I haven't really seen another candidate that I fully trust. A lot of them are just trying to present themselves as BS facsimiles of Bernie, and I really don't trust that, because it means they're just younger, lesser-known Joe Bidens and Hillary Clintons, people who aren't going to do anything, but because they're popular, we'll vote for them. He's a Democrat, and I know his name. I'm going to vote for that guy. Because apparently we don't give a shit, you know? We vote for whoever we know and whoever shares the party that we're a part of. You know, even the people that get on their soapbox and talk about how intelligent they are. I have plenty of Facebook friends that blather on about how much they understand the presidency and how much they understand the candidates, and they vote for the same stupid assholes. That being said, that is my girlfriend calling me, so I'm going to let you guys go. And till next time, thanks for listening.